6 years. That's how long I carried her dream on my back like a mule bred for loyalty and sacrifice. It wasn't always this heavy. At first, it felt like pride. Back when she'd hold my hand with ink-stained fingers after studying until midnight and whisper, "Thank you for believing in me, Marcus." I believed, all right. Believed so hard that I took double shifts, skipped vacations, said no to promotions that required me to relocate, and poured every bonus check into her tuition, her rent, her textbooks, and those endless essential fees that med school seemed to invent every other semester. When her student loan application got denied, I co-signed without hesitation. When her car broke down, I sold mine and took the bus. When she had breakdowns during finals, I stayed up with her, holding back the weight of her anxiety with a cracked joke and a warm meal. I wasn't just her husband. I was her cheerleader, her financier, her crisis intervention team, her human Xanax. I used to joke that I wasn't her partner, I was her sponsor. And we'd laugh, mostly because it was half true, and partly because it hurt to say out loud. But never, not once, did I say it with resentment. I loved her, and I believed in her. Until that morning. She was in the shower, humming some upbeat song, maybe something by SZA or Ari Lennox, whatever she played on her empowerment playlist. I was just passing by her desk to grab the charger when I noticed her laptop open, screen still bright. Her graduation speech draft sat front and center, the title bold and centered. To New Beginnings. Curious, proud even, I read on. To new beginnings, it started, and to the courage it takes to let go of the past. My fingers froze on the mousepad. My heart didn't quite beat the same after that sentence. I read it again. And to the courage it takes to let go of the past. Let go of the past? I wasn't the past. I was still very much standing in our house, paying our bills, reheating her leftovers, folding her laundry. I was the one who had just bought her a dress for her graduation dinner and booked the restaurant she had pinned on Instagram. What the hell did she mean by that? I scrolled down, hoping to find context, some line that redeemed me, some sentence that acknowledged the years I'd poured into her becoming the woman she now saw in the mirror. But there was nothing. Just mentions of her professors, her classmates, her mentors, her mother, and of course, Kayla, her ever-loyal best friend, who once told me I seemed too comfortable being average. No mention of me. Not even a thank you to the man who paid for every goddamn part of her journey from pre-med to the morning she'd put on that cap and gown. Not a word about the man who built her life while setting his own on fire. I just sat down in her desk chair, staring at the screen, hands folded in my lap like a man trying to stay calm at the edge of an earthquake. The cursor blinked at me like a taunt. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she just hadn't finished. Maybe I'd see a draft tomorrow that included me, called me her rock, or her constant. I almost laughed at how pathetic the hope sounded in my head. But that line, to let go of the past, kept echoing. It wasn't poetic. It was precise. It was a surgical strike buried in metaphors. And I was the target. When she walked out of the bathroom wrapped in steam, in that familiar terry cloth robe, she smiled at me and kissed my forehead. "You're up early." I nodded. "Yeah, just checking emails." "You didn't see the speech draft, did you?" I tilted my head. "I did." She paused, then said lightly, "Don't judge too hard. It's just a rough cut." Rough cut? That line was carved like marble. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just smiled and said, "Sounds like you're ready for what's next." She blinked for a second longer than usual, maybe wondering if I caught something. But she shrugged and walked off to start her makeup. That moment rewrote everything for me. I had been holding up a dream that no longer had a place for me in it. She had already rewritten her story, and I wasn't even a footnote. The 6 years I'd spent carrying her were already being packed away into the chapter labeled What I Outgrew. And the worst part? I wasn't even angry. I was numb. There's a silence that comes when your soul finally catches up with what your instincts have been whispering for months. I'd noticed the way she stopped laughing at my jokes, how she said, "my apartment," instead of "our place," how she introduced me less and less in public settings. I'd brushed it off as stress, but it wasn't stress. It was detachment dressed as ambition. And now, it was almost done. I closed her laptop gently. I didn't confront her. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even ask her to explain. Because in that moment, I realized something more important than any answer she could give. I had become invisible to the person I gave everything for. That morning, as she walked past me with her makeup perfect and her dreams already casting a shadow over mine. I made a quiet promise to myself. She thinks she's starting a new beginning. So will I. And mine won't come with a thank you note or a graduation cap. It'll come with something a little louder, a little colder, a little more permanent. She never left her phone unlocked. Not once in 6 years. It was something I joked about, the way she clutched it like it contained state secrets. If I so much as glanced at it while it buzzed on the table, she'd swoop in with a laugh that didn't quite touch her eyes. Privacy is healthy, she used to say. And I agreed. Until that morning. She left in a rush, coffee in one hand, keys in the other, purse half-zipped. She was late for some student panel on patient advocacy. I watched her go through the front window like I always did, sipping my own cup of stale, reheated caffeine. The door clicked shut. Then her phone buzzed on the couch. I glanced at it. Reflex, not suspicion. But the screen lit up with no lock. That never happened. Not even on accident. My first instinct was to call her, tell her she left it behind. But then the notification blinked again. Kayla. Of course. Girl, did you file yet? The clock is ticking. LOL. My stomach turned in a way I hadn't felt since my mother's funeral, something in between nausea and falling off a ledge. Another message came through before I could process the first. Photo's gonna look weird if you wait till after the ceremony. Don't want him all up in your graduation pics. Haha. I stared at the screen, as if disbelief could undo what I just read. Then came the dagger. He's still clueless, right? Gotta love how useful he's been, though. Let that ink dry, sis. Let that ink dry. It was like reading my own obituary in real time, sent via text and wrapped in emojis. I didn't scroll at first. I couldn't. I just sat there, phone in hand, heartbeat pounding against my ribs like a warning siren. The room went silent around me, except for the blood rushing to my ears. When I finally opened the thread, I saw months of messages, hidden in plain sight. Plans, laughs, complaints, strategy. Everything laid out in casual cruelty between two women who were supposed to love me, one as my wife, the other as a trusted friend. Marcus is like the perfect training wheel. Solid until you're ready to really ride. Med school was the goal, not the marriage. He's sweet, but he's not built for where I'm going. That one gutted me. Not because it was harsh, but because it was exactly how she'd started treating me in the last year. Like I was some relic of her old life. The man who paid for the classes, kept the fridge full, stayed up to quiz her with flashcards, but didn't belong in the polished version of her future. The Marcus she built with? That guy didn't make the cut. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just put the phone back where she left it, like some invisible crime scene I didn't want to disturb. I stood in the middle of our living room, surrounded by framed photos of us, ski trips, graduation dinners, our honeymoon in Tulum. And I realized none of it mattered anymore. All those smiles were temporary, staged for the camera, archived for the illusion. I was never her destination. I was the bridge she used to get there. But even in that storm of betrayal, I didn't break. Because what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been building something too. While she studied her anatomy flashcards and vented about clinical rotations, I was up every night in the spare room coding like a man possessed. NovaSync wasn't just an idea, it was a living, breathing platform. A medical diagnostics AI that could detect anomalies faster than human specialists. I'd pitched it quietly, developed it under the radar, surrounded myself with a skeleton crew of remote engineers who signed strict NDAs. I told no one, not even her. She thought I was just tinkering with some side project, something to keep me busy while she built her empire. She used to call it cute when I stayed up late at my desk, blue light glasses on, scribbling flowcharts like a man lost in a dream. But that dream had teeth. And just last week, it bit. MedAxis, one of the fastest-growing medtech corporations in the country, had acquired NovaSync in a quiet, under-the-table deal. $500 million. Closed. Locked. Executed. I'd insisted on a one-week NDA before they made the announcement. My lawyer, Raymond, had found it strange. You don't want the buzz? The press? What's the point of going public if you're keeping quiet? I just shook my head and said, give me a week. I needed to be clean. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't push. Raymond had known me for a decade. He could tell when something personal was in the shadows. And this? This was personal. I wasn't just holding on to that information for drama. I was holding it like a sword, waiting for the right moment to pull it from its sheath. She thought she was timing everything perfectly. Wait until graduation. Smile for the cameras. File the paperwork. Walk away with the illusion of moral high ground. And, she assumed, half of whatever little I had left. But she didn't know that little had just become life-changing. She didn't know she was divorcing a half-billionaire. And because of the NDA, she wouldn't have any legal claim to it. The ink wouldn't be dry in time. I sat back down, staring at the wall like it held answers I hadn't yet found. My heart ached, not just from betrayal, but from the eerie calm settling over me. It was like grieving someone who was still alive, someone who kissed you goodbye that morning but buried you in her mind months ago. She had no idea what storm she had just walked into. But I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to rage. I was going to wait. And when the ink dried, just like she planned, I'd be there. Not as the broken husband she thought she left behind, but as the man she never saw coming. The strange thing about success is how quiet it can be when you want it to be. While she buried herself in hospital rotations and late-night study groups, I buried myself in code. Not just lines of code, but architecture, scalability, future-proofing. NovaSync wasn't built to be trendy. It was built to be vital. It started as an idea during one of her breakdowns. She'd come home from a clinical shift fuming about how long a patient waited for results. "It's archaic," she'd muttered. "We're doctors, not fortune tellers. We shouldn't be guessing off delays." She was venting, but my mind had already begun assembling pieces. I started researching AI applications and diagnostics that very night. 2 months later, I had a working prototype that could scan inputted vitals and symptom clusters to produce predictive analytics. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than the lag-riddled mess hospitals were using. I tested it under fake names, ran simulations, even pitched it quietly to a small hospital in Oregon who thought they were beta testing a university research tool. Their success rate jumped 9% in a quarter. That was enough. I scaled, hired freelance engineers from around the world, created a shell company to shield development, kept my name off every public-facing document. And then, the real interest came. MedAxis. They've been watching the space for months, buying up smaller platforms and folding them into their larger ecosystem. But NovaSync was different. Our engine was cleaner, our prediction rate faster, and our interface light years ahead. I didn't even have to chase them. One of their VPs reached out to me directly via a secure message through a dev forum. "Is Marcus Blaine open to acquisition talk?" I was. Cautiously. 3 meetings later, I was sitting in a penthouse conference room in Chicago with their executive team, including their sharp-as-glass CEO, Anna Raleigh. She looked at me over the top of her glasses and said, "Why so quiet? This is brilliant work. You're sitting on something huge. Why haven't you gone public?" I sipped my water. Timing. Raymond, seated beside me, gave me a sidelong glance but said nothing. Anna leaned forward, clearly amused. "And what exactly are you waiting for, Mr. Blaine?" I looked her in the eye and smiled. "Graduation season." She laughed. "That's cryptic." I didn't elaborate. The deal took 3 more weeks to finalize. Lawyers drafted contracts thick as bricks. Analysts ran valuation models. MedAxis threw in options, profit sharing, a full exit clause, and a 1-year advisory role. I negotiated a 1-week media blackout after the ink dried. No press. No leaks. No internal memos beyond need-to-know circles. Raymond didn't get it. "You're worth $500 million now, Marcus. What exactly are we hiding for?" I just shrugged. "Let's call it a graduation gift." He didn't laugh, but he did stop asking. He's known me long enough to recognize that when I start speaking in metaphors, there's blood on the floor somewhere. That week, I walked through our house like a man holding 2 lives in his hands, one crumbling, one rising. She came home tired and distracted, talking about her rotation hours, some professor who wanted to mentor her postgrad, and how she might specialize in cardiology. I listened, nodded, even offered to rub her shoulders like I used to. She smiled, grateful but absent. She had already left me in her mind. I could feel it every time her eyes didn't quite meet mine. But she didn't know I had just transferred the final payment into our shared account. 6 years of debt, all gone. The account she thought was modest now had an extra $380,000 in it. My parting gift. I wanted her to think she'd won. That the financial rug was still under her feet. I kept playing the role. Supportive husband. Reliable Marcus. The guy she could count on until she let go of the past. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. There's a stillness that comes when you know how the story ends and everyone else is still fumbling through Act 2. One night, I stayed up late, going over NovaSync's backend infrastructure. It was like checking on a child I'd raised while no one else was looking. Clean code, strong security, proprietary algorithms, it all hummed like a living, breathing thing. She'd never once asked about it, never peeked over my shoulder or inquired about my late nights at the desk. Maybe she didn't care. Or maybe she didn't believe I had anything worth caring about. She was wrong. The morning before her graduation, she was up early, curling her hair and rehearsing her speech in front of the mirror. I watched her through the crack in the door. She looked beautiful, confident, ready to conquer the world. And yet, I couldn't help but feel like I was staring at a stranger wearing my wife's skin. I left a gift box on the kitchen counter before she walked out the door, a silver bracelet with her initials, a small card inside that read, "You made it. Proud of you. M." She texted me a heart emoji an hour later. I didn't respond, because by then, I was already in Raymond's office, signing the final phase of the acquisition. There were cameras, a handshake photo with Anna Raleigh, and a glass of champagne I barely sipped. When it was done, Raymond handed me a manila envelope. "Everything's finalized. Wire confirmation is in. And your press release, set to drop in 2 days, per your request." I nodded. "Good." He tilted his head. "So, are we celebrating?" I stood there, staring out his window at the city skyline. "Not yet. The celebration comes later." He didn't ask when. He didn't have to. He just raised his glass and said, "To the long game." I clinked his glass and whispered, "To the reveal." That night, I returned home before she did. I reheated leftovers, set the table, lit a candle like I used to when she pulled all-nighters. When she walked in with her gown draped over her arm and stress still in her eyes, I kissed her forehead. "You hungry?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Starving." I served her, asked about her day, let her complain about some speech edits and Kayla being late. She didn't know that I knew everything. She didn't notice the slight edge in my smile. She had no idea I had just signed the kind of deal people kill for. She thought I was her safety net. She didn't realize I was the storm. Graduation day came wrapped in sunshine and irony. She was radiant, absolutely glowing. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't stir something in me. There was still a flicker of the woman I'd fallen in love with underneath all that ambition and detachment, but it was buried under layers of performance, curated smiles, and polished speeches. Still, I played my part. Crisp navy suit, pressed shirt, matching tie, standing beside her like a prop. Just the husband. We parked near the auditorium, her parents riding behind us in their rental, all grins and fuss. Her mother was already crying. Her father, stoic as ever, held a bouquet of pink lilies too tightly, like he was afraid someone might steal the only thing he'd actually contributed to her journey. "You okay?" I asked her as we crossed the pavement. She looked at me briefly, blinking against the sun. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" I shrugged. "It's a big day." She nodded, then walked ahead, heels clacking against the concrete, gown slung over her arm like it weighed nothing. And maybe it didn't. Maybe all those years really had become weightless to her tuition payments, grocery runs, the late-night drives to the emergency room when she got sick, the time I sold my vintage guitar to cover one of her surprise lab fees. Forgotten, or rewritten into something else. Something disposable. Backstage was a flurry of activity. Graduates hugging, fixing each other's caps, lining up alphabetically while parents found their seats. I stood to the side, tucked near a wall, trying not to be in the way. A few of her classmates passed by, offering polite nods or casual glances, the kind you give someone you don't fully recognize but assume must belong. She spotted me from a few feet away and called out, "Marcus, hand me the folder?" I held it out. She took it without looking at me. Then, turning to the woman beside her, she said, "Oh, this is Marcus. Just my husband." Just, that word wasn't new, but hearing it that way, flat, tossed out like an explanation for a misplaced purse. Hit harder than I expected. Not my partner, not my biggest supporter, not even the man who made this possible. Just my husband. I felt like background noise at my own investment. I smiled anyway. "Nice to meet you," her classmate said. "You too," I replied. Then I stepped back, letting her own the space. That was what she wanted, right? To shine without my shadow anywhere near her spotlight. I watched her pose for pictures, adjust her sash, check her makeup in the reflection of her phone. Her eyes scanned the crowd for Kayla, and when she finally spotted her, she lit up. They hugged like sisters. Kayla winked at her. I didn't need to hear what they said. I'd already read enough. But watching it live, that wink, that sly little smirk, it turned something in my gut. I caught Kayla's eyes for a brief moment. Her smile faltered. Good. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and forced inspiration. The dean droned on about perseverance, dedication, the triumph of the human spirit. I clapped when everyone else clapped, cheered when names were called. When it was her turn to walk across the stage, I stood, not out of obligation, but out of closure. I watched her accept her diploma with a glowing smile, watched her grip the hand of the administrator like this was the beginning of her empire. And maybe it was. Just not the one she thought she controlled. The applause died down, the final speaker took the mic, and then it came, her moment. She stepped up to the podium like it belonged to her. Confident, poised, beautiful in that high achiever way that demanded admiration. I already knew what was coming. I'd read the speech. Still, part of me hoped she'd changed it. That maybe something in her heart had softened since then. Nope. To new beginnings, she started, smiling out at the sea of caps and families, and to the courage it takes to let go of the past. There it was, word for word. No acknowledgement, not even a glance my way. She spoke of mentors, of late-night studying in libraries, of how her chosen family kept her sane. She thanked Kayla by name. She gave a nod to her professors, to her mother for always believing in her, and to everyone who saw my future even when I couldn't see it myself. Not a single syllable about me. I sat through the rest of the speech like a ghost in my own life. Numb, applauding because it was easier than walking out. I could feel the heat in my chest, disappointment simmering beneath stillness. But I didn't let it break the surface. I just kept smiling. Afterward, the photo frenzy began. Families poured onto the lawn, snapping selfies, throwing caps in the air. Her father insisted on a dozen variations. Just her, just the girls, one with her mom, one with the whole tribe. Finally, she turned to me. Marcus, can you take one of us? Not, can you be in one? Just take it. I nodded, took the phone, captured the moment. Thank you, she said absently, already checking the angles. Then, almost as an afterthought, she slid next to me and said, okay, one quick shot with my husband. The smile she gave for the camera was flawless, professional, detached, rehearsed. Click. That was the photo she would use, probably. Post it with some caption about support and teamwork, just enough to protect her image. But the moment the ink dried on those papers, I knew she'd crop me out of her narrative like I was a smudge on glass. Still, I said nothing. Later that evening, back at our apartment, I handed her the same flowers her father had nearly crushed earlier that morning. She looked at them, smiled politely, and kissed me on the cheek. I'm exhausted, she said. But this was a good day. Yeah, I replied, watching her disappear down the hallway. It was. In a way, it really was. Because while she celebrated her degree, her photos, her perfectly sculpted speech, what she didn't realize was this. The real graduation hadn't been hers. It had been mine. It happened exactly 1 week later, like clockwork. The house was quiet. A soft Tuesday morning sun filtered through the blinds, and the smell of coffee lingered in the kitchen. I'd made breakfast. Her favorite, even. Soft scrambled eggs, toast with honey, and papaya slices she swore helped her digestion. She was scrolling her phone as she ate, barely acknowledging me except for the occasional nod. I watched her over the rim of my mug. There was something surgical in her silence, like she was bracing to deliver a dose of pain she'd already measured. When she finally spoke, her tone was clinical, her words flat. Marcus, she said, not looking up. I've thought a lot about this. It's time we part ways. She didn't even use the word divorce. I put my mug down gently. Part ways. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin manila envelope, sliding it across the table like a receipt. I'll make this easy. Just sign. No need for drama. I didn't touch it. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The same woman who used to fall asleep mid-sentence on the couch with anatomy flashcards in her lap. The same woman I used to pick up from clinicals at midnight, half-frozen and exhausted, clutching fast food bags and murmuring about chest x-rays. Now, she sat across from me calm, rehearsed, detached, as if I were a client she'd finished working with. I opened the envelope slowly, unfolded the papers. It was all there. Neatly typed, itemized, emotionless. She wanted half. Half of everything. The apartment, the car, the furniture, and of course, the business. She listed Novasync as marital property, estimating its value at a modest $80,000, clearly assuming it was just some quirky tech project, nothing of real consequence. Then came the bold part: spousal support, monthly payments, justification, career sacrifice during medical training. She claimed she deferred income potential for the sake of our household, that she deserved ongoing compensation for the years I'd supported her. I stared at the words. I wasn't angry. I was impressed. It was bold, efficient, cold. She didn't flinch as I read. She just sipped her coffee and said, "It's all standard. I've already retained counsel." I folded the papers, placed them back in the envelope, and tapped my fingers on it lightly. "You're sure this is what you want?" She looked at me like I was asking something silly. "It's for the best." I nodded. "All right. Then give me a few days to respond formally." That surprised her. She expected resistance. A fight. Maybe even begging. She'd built this version of me in her head. Passive, dependent, too soft to let go. The same man who cheered her through med school, bought her groceries, and folded her scrubs. She didn't realize that while she was busy planning her escape, I'd already opened the door. She stood, picked up her plate, rinsed it, and turned off the faucet like she'd done it 1,000 times. Like this was just another normal Tuesday. She kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks for breakfast." Then she walked out the door with her white coat draped over her arm and her stethoscope hanging from her neck like a badge of victory. I stood in the kitchen, holding the envelope like it might dissolve if I gripped it too tightly. 3 months ago, she came home in tears because a patient died unexpectedly. I held her for an hour on the bathroom floor while she sobbed into my chest. She told me I was her safe place. Now I was an obstacle. I sat down at my desk and called Raymond. "It's go time." "You got served." "Yep." He chuckled bitterly. "She has no idea, does she?" "None." We set the wheels in motion. He'd already had everything prepared: financial declarations, ownership documentation, digital timestamps, contract history. We had airtight records of when Novasync began, the original LLC formation, the transfer of IP rights. And best of all, we had the acquisition documents, sealed, signed, and dated 3 days after the filing. She thought she'd be walking away with half a startup. She didn't know she'd just forfeited half a fortune. Raymond and I met in his office that afternoon. He flipped through her petition like it was a kindergarten art project. "Spousal support," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Bold. She's entitled to nothing post-filing, right?" "Exactly. Especially since the acquisition wasn't finalized until after she served you. Everything beyond that date is legally yours, free and clear." I nodded slowly. "Let's keep it quiet. No retaliation. No show of force. I want her to believe this is going exactly how she planned." Raymond leaned back in his chair. "You sure about that? You don't want to file a counterclaim yet?" "Not yet," I said. "Let her feel comfortable. Let her think she's winning." He grinned. "You're playing the long game. Always." That night, she came home late. Said she had a rough shift. I listened, nodded, pretended to care. Not because I didn't, but because I knew it didn't matter anymore. Her emotions were no longer my responsibility. Her bad days, her triumphs, her fake apologies, those belonged to the next man naive enough to believe he could build a life with her. We went to bed in silence. She turned her back to me. I stared at the ceiling. 3 more days until the announcement. 3 more days until her perfect little plan unraveled. I closed my eyes and counted backward from 1,000. Not because I was anxious, but because I needed the quiet before the storm. She wanted a clean exit. I was going to give her one. Clean, legal, and absolute. And when it was over, when the truth came out, when the ink dried and the media explosion hit like a wave, she'd look back at that morning and realize just how badly she miscalculated the man sitting across from her. She thought I was soft. She thought I was static. She thought she was walking away with everything. But she was walking away from a $500 million empire. And she didn't even say thank you. It dropped at 9:01 a.m. on a Thursday. Right on schedule. No pre-hype, no teasers. Just a clean, direct press release from MedAxis posted on their official channels. Picked up within seconds by every major tech and healthcare news outlet in the country. MedAxis acquires Novasync in $500 million strategic expansion deal. There it was. My name in black and white, my photo next to Anna Raleigh, CEO of MedAxis, our hands clasped in a firm shake, both of us smiling like a pair of industry titans. I wore that smile like armor. Clean, professional, unbothered. But beneath it, it was war paint. By 9:06, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Emails, calls, texts, contacts I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Investors who ignored my pitch decks back when I was bootstrapping wanted to grab coffee. Former classmates congratulated me like we'd been best friends all along. LinkedIn lit up like a Christmas tree. But one message made me pause. Her name on the screen. Her. What is this? Marcus. What the hell is this? No. Hi. No, congratulations. Just confusion. Panic. A flicker of dawning comprehension. I stared at the message for a full minute. I could imagine her sitting at the break room table, scrolling through her phone with a confused frown, reading the headline again and again like it might change if she blinked hard enough. I didn't reply. I had nothing to say, not anymore. My words had already been spoken through contracts, valuations, and that perfect headline that confirmed everything she didn't know. Instead of texting back, I opened my calendar and forwarded the contact inquiry from Forbes requesting a short quote for their feature article. I replied simply, "Let's talk legacy." At 10:15 a.m., Raymond called, chuckling so hard he nearly choked. "Brother," he said, "you've officially broken the internet." "Good," I said, sipping my tea. "She texted you yet?" "Of course. She'll call next. Then maybe cry. Then show up. She won't get past Damaris." He laughed again, longer this time. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." By noon, she called 4 times. Damaris, my assistant, had strict instructions: block, log, and forward to legal. Nothing more. But just after lunch, I heard her voice. Not in person. Not directly. Over the phone, in the hallway outside my office. The kind of whisper cry that turned sharp at the edges. Damaris had stepped out to lunch, and one of the interns had buzzed her in without realizing who she was. I stood behind the glass door, listening. "Kayla, I swear to God, I didn't know," she was saying. He never said a word. Not a single thing. And now it's everywhere. It's on every screen. $500 million. Kayla. He played me. Played you? No. I played the game you started. I just finished it better. Her voice broke. Why didn't I wait? Why didn't I just... God, I filed too early. And there it was. The moment it clicked. She didn't just file for a divorce. She filed herself out of a legacy. I turned the doorknob and stepped out. Her eyes snapped to mine. Red, puffy, mascara trailing ever so slightly. Still beautiful, still composed, but this time, the mask had cracks. "Marcus," she breathed. "Please, can we talk?" I tilted my head. "I think your paperwork said everything." She stepped forward. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. If you had." I interrupted. "If you'd known I was about to be rich, you'd have stayed?" She paused. Just a flicker. That was all the answer I needed. I gestured toward the elevator. "You need to leave." "Marcus, wait. I made a mistake." "No. You made a plan. You just didn't check the timeline." She blinked rapidly, her breath catching. "I was scared, okay? I thought we were done. I didn't think. You didn't think I was worth staying for," I said. "Let's not rewrite it now." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Silence filled the space between us like a verdict. She looked around, suddenly aware of the eyes on her, my team, the interns, Damaris just returning from lunch. People pretending not to look while absolutely looking. She pulled her jacket tighter. "Can we at least talk later?" she asked, voice lower now. I shook my head. "From now on, if you want to talk, you talk to Raymond." The elevator dinged behind her. "Don't do this," she said as the doors slid open. "I'm not doing anything." "You did." And with that, she stepped inside, the doors closing on a face I no longer recognized. That night, I sat at home alone. No music, no noise. Just me, a decanter of scotch, and the TV muted as news anchors discussed my acquisition. It should have felt like victory. Maybe, in some ways, it did. But mostly, it felt like silence. Not sadness. Not joy. Just the sound of a chapter ending. I picked up my phone and checked my emails. Dozens of speaking invitations, media requests, board offers. But I scrolled past them all until I reached the last message forwarded from Raymond's team. Her lawyer. Subject: revised petition. New language. Claims of hidden assets. Attempts to reclassify Nova Sync as marital intellectual property. I almost laughed. It was so desperate. So clumsy. She'd finally realized what she walked away from, and now she was trying to climb back in through a legal window already sealed shut. Raymond had already filed the rebuttal. He'd included the original timeline of the acquisition, the NDA proof, and, most damning of all, her own text messages to Kayla, which I had quietly collected and archived. The messages where she joked about using me, where she timed the filing like a business transaction, where she called me useful. Those weren't going to vanish. My legal team wasn't just going to fight back. They were going to bury the strategy she thought was clever under the weight of her own words. I poured another drink and looked around the apartment. The place we picked out together. The kitchen I stocked. The couch she cried on during step 2 boards. The bookshelf with the framed photo of our wedding day tucked between dusty medical volumes and an old cookbook I used more than she ever did. It was all mine now. Not because of the court, but because she'd forfeited it. And the woman who once dreamed of white coats and luxury would now face something she'd never planned for. Irrelevance. The first sign of panic came 3 days after the press release. The apartment smelled different. Not like the clinical peppermint oil she usually diffused or the soy candles that made the place feel like a Pinterest board. No, this was nostalgia. Butterscotch cookies and lavender. She was baking. Voluntarily. I stepped into the kitchen and found her standing there in an apron she hadn't worn in years, the one with a cartoon heart and the words DR in training scrawled across it in faded red. Her hair was tied back, face soft, almost hopeful. "Hey," she said. "I made cookies. Your favorite." I stared at her. Not angrily. Not with suspicion. Just with the calm detachment of a man watching a rerun of a show he'd already outgrown. "Thanks," I said. I took one, bit it, nodded politely, then walked out without another word. That was the beginning of the performance. Suddenly, she was everywhere, offering back rubs, leaving little post-it notes on the bathroom mirror. "You've got this. And proud of you." She started cooking again. Dinner at 6:30, candles lit. She played our old jazz playlist at night like we were a couple reconnecting after a tiff. But her eyes gave her away. They watched me too closely. Tracked every movement like a hawk trying to time its descent. She laughed too easily, touched my arm too often. The performance was clumsy, because this wasn't love. This was fear. She was trying to crawl back into the life she threw away. The visits to my office started soon after. The first time, she showed up with lunch. I didn't even let her past reception. Damaris intercepted her with a raised brow and a clipboard. "She says she's just dropping off food." "Noted," I said. Politely declined. Of course, Damaris replied without missing a beat. She didn't come back empty-handed again, but she kept coming. 3 times the next week. Flowers. Lattes. A handwritten card about healing and forgiveness. All denied entry. All logged. Damaris kept a spreadsheet. Names, dates, items, messages. She was methodical, almost enthusiastic. "She really thinks she's going to wiggle back in," she said one morning, sipping her espresso. "She thinks guilt and charm are assets," I replied. "And she's late to both." I nodded. "Log everything. If she gets aggressive, notify legal." It didn't take long for her lawyer to send a revised petition. The language changed. Now, they accused me of hiding financial gains, intentionally misleading her during the divorce process. They called the MedAxis deal a concealed asset, as if I'd crafted a whole corporate merger just to spite her. Raymond responded with elegance and steel. We submitted her original petition, complete with timestamps that preceded the final acquisition. We added screenshots of the text she sent Kayla about using me, about filing early, about walking away clean. And just for insurance, we included the message logs from Damaris's visitor spreadsheet, highlighting the sudden shift in her behavior after the deal went public. She wasn't just clawing at what she lost. She was exposing her own intent. The last time she tried to show up at my office, building security stopped her. She wasn't on the list. Her name flagged the visitor system now, an alert to my assistant and legal counsel. Damaris texted me a photo, her standing in the lobby, arms folded, frustration written all over her face. "Damaris, she says she just wants to talk. Heart to heart." Me. Heart to heart? We signed the death certificate already. Damaris sent a thumbs up and walked her out personally. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Her lawyer sent another letter. This one was a plea disguised as a warning. Reconsider the terms. Negotiate. Avoid court. Raymond laughed out loud when he read it. She's spiraling. She should. Think she knows what's coming next? She will, I said. When the counter hits. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by silence. My phone buzzed again, this time, a voicemail. I played it on speaker. Her voice cracked. Marcus, I know I messed up. I thought I was doing the right thing for me. I thought I was being brave. But maybe I was just being stupid. Can we talk? Please? I'll sign whatever you want. I just want to fix this. It was the most honest thing she'd said in months. And it was far too late. I forwarded the message to Raymond. The next day, he filed the counter. Not out of spite. Out of principle. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation followed by attempted cleanup once the target turned out to be more than she bargained for. Raymond's filing was meticulous. 1 count of misrepresentation, 1 of attempted marital fraud, and a clause invoking a breach of verbal agreement. I had the emails, the notes, the voicemails, all documenting her promises to repay me for med school, her acknowledgement that I funded her entire education. It was ironclad. Then came the next blow. An anonymous complaint was filed to the state medical board. A formal ethics review was opened. Someone had submitted a bundle of her text messages. Screen captures. Metadata included. The committee wasn't stupid. They saw exactly what it was. An aspiring physician joking about using someone for financial gain, timing a divorce to avoid sharing future earnings, weaponizing a relationship for personal profit. It didn't matter that it wasn't a felony. It was enough to question her integrity. Enough to trigger a review. When the news reached her, I wasn't there. But Damaris overheard her sobbing in the lobby bathroom. Security was called. She left in tears, clutching her phone, her face pale and pinched. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about letting the truth run its course. She'd walked out on me thinking I was nothing but a temporary stepping stone. But the moment she filed those papers, she kicked off an avalanche. And now, as she scrambled to rebuild the wall she tore down with her own hands, all I had to do was watch. She panicked. I planned. And there was no crawling out from that. It was oddly quiet the morning the countersuit was filed. No thunderstorms. No dramatic music in the background. Just the hum of my espresso machine and the low whir of the dishwasher. I sat at the kitchen island, dressed in a dark Henley and jeans, reading through the finalized document on my tablet. Every word was sharp, calculated, precise. Raymond had outdone himself. Count 1, intentional misrepresentation. Count 2, attempted marital fraud. Count 3, breach of verbal contract. That last one, that was personal. It was the email she never thought I kept, sent from her student account in year 2 of med school. The subject line was casual. My promise, don't let me forget. She had written it after one of her particularly emotional study breakdowns, saying she didn't want to ever forget how much I'd invested in her dream. She'd promised to pay me back for every dime once she became a doctor. She probably assumed I deleted it years ago, but I kept it. Just like I'd kept every transfer receipt, every loan statement, every credit card payment tied to her education. Not because I thought I'd need them, but because when you give someone everything, you want to remember the cost. Raymond had also attached an itemized spreadsheet of what I'd paid over the years. Tuition, $312,000 rent, utilities, textbooks, $48,000 travel, groceries, miscellaneous, $20,000 total. $380,000. Her lawyer responded within hours, asking if we were open to mediation. That's when I knew the countersuit hit harder than expected. They thought we'd cave for a quiet settlement. They didn't realize I wasn't trying to settle. I was trying to set a record. That afternoon, she called. I answered. Marcus, she said softly. We don't have to go through court. I'll sign whatever. Let's just be adults about this. Adults, I said. Like when you joked about using me until the ink dried? She inhaled sharply. You read those texts out of context. I read them with dates and timestamps. That's all the context I needed. Silence on the other end. Then she said, please. I'll withdraw peacefully. I'll give up everything. Just don't ruin my name. That's what it came down to. Not remorse. Not love. Reputation. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the skyline outside my window. You ruined your name, not me. I just held up the mirror. She hung up. No apology. Just silence. Later that evening, Raymond called to let me know she was trying to get the case dismissed. She says she wants to move on amicably, he told me. She means quietly. Exactly. Tell her no, I said. We're moving forward. Raymond paused. You sure? I'm not doing this for revenge, Ray. I'm doing this for every person who ever got used and discarded like a stepping stone. I'm doing this so she knows that burning bridges doesn't always mean you get to walk away. He sighed, then said, All right, we'll proceed. But the fallout didn't stop there. By the end of the week, the medical licensing board had confirmed that her ethics hearing would move forward. The evidence had been reviewed. Her character was now a matter of public interest. She went dark on social media, deleted photos, turned off comments. Kayla tried to play damage control, posting vague quotes about people trying to dim your light. It backfired. Screenshots of their text exchanges leaked anonymously. Someone posted them on a pre-med forum. The title read, This is what entitlement looks like. They were reshared, debated, analyzed. Suddenly, she wasn't an inspiring grad with a glowing future. She was a case study in ambition gone toxic. I didn't need to say a word. The world was doing it for me. One night, Damaris texted me a screenshot of a Reddit thread where someone had dissected the situation in bullet points. At the end, they wrote, Moral of the story, don't marry someone just to upgrade your status. Especially not someone who reads the fine print better than you. I didn't laugh. I just saved the thread. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted documentation. A record of how someone can try to destroy you and fail. She made one last attempt before the court date. Showed up at the apartment wearing the same outfit she wore the day I proposed to her. I opened the door but didn't let her inside. Don't you remember us? She said, voice trembling. How it used to be. I remember everything, I said. That's the difference. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't want to be your enemy, Marcus. You made that decision when you turned me into your exit strategy. She stood there for a long moment before whispering, I thought you were just a placeholder. I nodded once. You were wrong. Then I closed the door. I sat down on the couch, let the silence soak in, and stared at the divorce paperwork again. The original, the revised, the countersuit. All of it laid out like chapters in a book I didn't ask to write. She tried to play the game, but I designed the rules. Courtrooms aren't built for closure. They're built for containment, of emotions, of noise, of mess. They smell like old paper and recycled air. The chairs are never quite comfortable. The clocks tick louder than they should. And when the person who once held your heart walks in wearing a blazer they probably picked for sympathy, it doesn't sting the way you thought it might. It just clarifies everything. She walked in 2 minutes late, flanked by her lawyer, hairstyled in soft curls like it might soften her case. Her expression was pulled tight, a blend of nerves and entitlement. I watched her scan the room, hesitate when she saw me, then look away like I was the one who broke us. She still hadn't realized the difference between leaving and losing. Her lawyer, Richard Kane, was polished. Expensive suit, confident gait, the kind of man who specialized in flipping narratives. He stood when the judge entered, his hands folded neatly, his tone syrup smooth. Your Honor, he began, this case is about transparency. My client, Dr. Alana Rhodes, entered her marriage with trust. She supported her husband through his business journey, unaware of the substantial financial developments he withheld from her. We argue this was intentional, strategic, an attempt to deprive her of fair marital assets. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. I simply looked at the judge, then at Raymond, who stood calmly beside me, the picture of composed precision. Raymond stepped forward. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Marcus Blaine, was served divorce papers on April 3rd. The MedAxis acquisition was finalized on April 6th. The NDA and internal documents proving the timeline are included in Exhibit A. Moreover, text messages between Dr. Rhodes and her friend. Exhibit B shows she planned to file early in order to keep photos clean and let the ink dry before anything public surfaced. The judge, an older man with tired eyes and a reputation for zero tolerance for drama, adjusted his glasses and flipped through the exhibits. He didn't rush. Every second felt like a hammer pounding against the shell of the story she had tried to build. Richard tried to recover. These texts are informal, out of context. Your Honor, Raymond interrupted, they are time-stamped, dated, and corroborated by the sequence of events. The judge looked at Alana. Did you file for divorce under the belief that Mr. Blaine's company was of modest value? She swallowed. At the time, yes. Were you aware of the potential deal with MedAxis? She hesitated. No, Raymond cleared his throat. Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to call Ms. Anna Raleigh to testify. The doors opened. and Anna entered like a force of nature. Elegant, sharp, no nonsense. CEO of MedAxis and arguably one of the most respected figures in the industry. She took the stand. Ms. Raleigh, Raymond began. When did discussions with Mr. Blaine regarding Novasync begin? February 9th, she said, without a blink. Our legal team reached out based on an internal referral. And when was the deal finalized? April 6th. Was there any indication during the early discussions that Mr. Blaine was going through divorce proceedings? No, she replied. The matter came up only after the filing was public. But our NDA predated that. Did he ever misrepresent the value or status of the company to you? Not once. In fact, he was unusually reserved. Cautious, even. Raymond nodded and turned to the judge. Your Honor, the testimony confirms the acquisition did not exist as a legal asset during the time of divorce filing. The plaintiff's claim to half the acquisition is therefore invalid. The judge nodded slowly, jotting notes. Then came the final blow. Raymond brought out the email. Subject: My promise, don't let me forget. He read it aloud in full. Her words, her acknowledgement, her promise to pay back every cent of the $380,000 I had invested in her education. Richard objected. It's emotional, not contractual. Raymond held up a copy of her signature on a follow-up message. It was followed by a written payment plan proposal. Dated. Acknowledged. Never retracted. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked up, leaned forward, and said the words I'd waited 6 months to hear. Spousal support is denied. Claim to Novasync's valuation is denied. Reimbursement of $380,000 in educational support is granted to Mr. Blaine. Her face cracked then. It wasn't just shock. It was the realization that she hadn't just lost her case. She'd lost the story. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. A few reporters in the back began scribbling rapidly. This was going to leak. Even if the docket was sealed temporarily, someone would talk. Richard leaned in toward her, whispering something urgent. She shook her head. Her shoulders slumped. And for the first time, she looked small. Not because she was weak, but because the image she built had finally shattered under the weight of her choices. The judge banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. I stood, buttoned my blazer, and didn't look back. As I walked past her, she glanced up, eyes red but dry. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. I didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't gloat. Because victory doesn't need a monologue. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Lighter. Raymond slapped my back. Hell of a win. It was never about winning, I said. It was about the truth. Well, the truth just bought you justice and $380,000. I exhaled, slow and deep. She'll never be the same, Raymond said. She already wasn't, I replied. We walked to the car in silence. And when I shut the door behind me, I didn't feel relief. I felt finality. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the burial of a version of me that once believed love meant unconditional sacrifice. Now I knew better. Love, real love, doesn't demand your silence in exchange for someone else's rise. And when someone treats you like a chapter, you don't wait for the next page. You close the book. 1 month passed. Quietly, without drama, without fireworks. No new texts. No calls. No surprise appearances at my office. She disappeared from my life the same way she tried to erase me from hers, surgical, deliberate, clean. Except this time, the silence wasn't mine to carry. It was hers. Then one morning, an envelope arrived. No postage. Hand-delivered. Cream-colored, with my name written in careful cursive I hadn't seen since our first anniversary. I stared at it for a while, not out of hesitation, but out of recognition. Some things, some people, wrap their guilt in elegance. I opened it. Inside was a check. Partial payment, $75,000, and a single note, written on the same kind of stationery she used for med school thank you cards. I never thought you'd be the one to win. I was wrong. No apology. No explanation. Just 7 words soaked in defeat. I folded the note back into the envelope and walked it to the sink. Watched the flame from a match curl the edges black. Watched the paper curl in on itself like it was trying to disappear. That was the last gift I accepted from her. The rest of my day went on like any other. At the office, the new product team was finalizing the prototype for Novasync Horizon. A portable diagnostic unit that could be deployed in rural clinics with 0 signal latency. I'd hired 10 engineers in the last 3 weeks. The dev floor buzzed with energy. Whiteboards covered in sketches, code snippets, timelines. People solving problems because they believed in the mission, not because they were trying to prove something to someone else. In the corner of my office sat a shelf with one photo frame. Not of her, of me. Sitting at a cracked dining table, coding at midnight under a flickering bulb. I'd taken it during the early days of NovaSync, back when it was just me, caffeine, and an idea I couldn't shake. I kept that photo to remind myself. I didn't build this out of revenge. I built it because I refused to be small. That afternoon, I spoke on a panel for strategic scaling at an innovation conference downtown. I wore a charcoal blazer, no tie, open collar, confident but grounded. As I walked backstage, someone from the event staff handed me a card. "She left this at the front," the girl said hesitantly. "Said you'd understand." I took it, half curious, half exhausted. Opened it. I saw the panel invite. I wanted to be there. I just couldn't. "I'm sorry." I tore it in half, dropped it in the trash. "You don't get to spectate the success you try to sabotage." The panel went well. I talked about scalability, investor pressure, founder fatigue, the importance of building not just for market fit, but for soul fit. The audience leaned in, took notes, asked good questions. Afterward, a young founder approached me. "How did you know it would work?" she asked. I smiled. "I didn't. I just knew I couldn't let someone else's limited vision trap me." She nodded slowly, inspired. I walked away knowing I'd become the man I used to dream about being when I was sleeping on potential. At home that night, I stood in the kitchen alone, stirring a pot of red lentil stew I'd perfected during her third-year rotations. Back then, I made it for her. Tonight, I made it for me. The difference tasted like peace. I took my bowl out to the balcony, looked out over the skyline, and let the city hum around me. There was no applause, no echo of footsteps down the hall. Just my breath, steady and strong. My phone buzzed. "Raymond, check your inbox," he said. "Your TEDx pitch got accepted." I smiled. "What's the theme?" "Reclaiming power. You were born for this." I nodded, then ended the call. Later, I opened a folder on my laptop titled Future. Inside were drafts, ideas, sketched outlines for a mentorship fund, something I'd been thinking about launching. A way to support people who, like me, had built everything while being overlooked. Maybe I'd call it the Invisible Builder Fund. It wasn't about charity. It was about recognition, about making sure no one had to prove their worth in silence ever again. A week after the check arrived, I received a LinkedIn request from her. No message, no note. I declined it without hesitation. She had graduated, but I had evolved. She delivered a speech about letting go of the past, but I turned that past into capital, into ownership, into something that couldn't be cropped out of a photo or buried in a revised petition. She played the short game. I built a legacy. Somewhere out there, she was probably trying to rebuild her image, praying the medical board cleared her ethics review. Maybe she'd get lucky. Maybe she wouldn't. But either way, her future would carry the stain of a plan gone wrong, and the name of the man who refused to be erased. As for me, I didn't need closure. I didn't need vindication. I'd already received the only graduation gift I ever truly wanted, freedom. And the view from this side of peace? It was worth every bill I ever paid.